Hello, good afternoon. Or you can say good afternoon to me, at least do that. We're at a trade show, it's allowed. Thank you for the introduction. I'm going to talk about three things. Talk a little bit about who Microsoft is, just for a minute or so. But then I'm going to look at IoT, the Internet of Things. We're going to look at AI, artificial intelligence. And then we're going to look at how those two things work in the context of farming and rural communities, and some of the aspects around that. Is that okay? If you want to know about Xbox or Office, this is not the right session. So let's just start with the company I work for, which you probably know about. Is a pretty big company and does fairly well. And our mission is to empower every person and organization on the planet to achieve more, which sounds very highfalutin, which in a way it is, but we take it very seriously. We take it so, and the hard part of that sentence is the word every. So that means here too. And that's really important, and that's why I get on a plane from Seattle and come 7,000 miles to be here, because I think it matters. It's just as important as anywhere else that we use this technology on a global basis. So I want to see it used and worked here. So let's talk a little bit about some of the technologies and the things that I'm working with and using that you might want to be using in the future. So let's start with IoT, the Internet of Things, which doesn't actually mean anything at all as far as I'm aware of, because if this is what's the Internet of Things, well, I don't know. It's a kind of a catch-all statement for something. But if we try and break it down, what we're talking about are things, physical things, devices, machines, and what's happening these days is that those machines are getting connected to a network. So, you know, your TV connects to a network. Your light bulbs can connect to a network. Your phone obviously connects to a network. It's connecting to a network. Smaller and smaller devices. In fact, by 2030, about 20 million devices an hour are connecting to the network for the first time, are connecting to the internet. So it's billions and billions and billions of devices. And the same is in rural spaces and in agriculture as well. And those connected devices produce data. They say if they're on, they say if they're off, they say if they're working or not working, they say if they've got information to share. They have all kinds of data inside of them. But that's where the challenge is. So you've got millions of machines making all this data, but we need to have some form of analytics, some sort of insight to make sense of them. So imagine if you put a device on a herd of dairy cattle, and every cow has a sensor. Well, that's good. You might get some data. You get some data off of it, but unless you're looking at it, unless you see the patterns, it's not really that useful. So you need some analytics from that, and then finally, from that analytics, you then want to action it. You need to do something with it. And so when we talk about Internet of Things, we're really talking about all these things put together. So a little bit later on, I'm going to show how these things apply in the context of agriculture, in the context of farming, and what they imply for the future and how that might work. I also want to talk about AI, artificial intelligence, and the idea of humans are naturally ingenious, but what we're interested in doing is amplifying human ingenuity. That's what AI is. And at Microsoft, we have about 6 or 7 different types of AI. So we have vision, so we can identify something when we look at it. We call it image classification. I did a project up in Anglesey with a set of school children where they could identify between a Barbie doll and a cat. Okay? Now, they taught the computer to see the difference between the two. And the computers are very good at doing that. So we get to a point now where we can start saying, can we identify a plant or a different kind of plant? Can we look for a bacteria? So we can look at thousands and thousands of images and identify something in it. So anything that you have to look at regularly, through AI, we can give help. Now, through language, as you've probably noticed, I've got a little earpiece in my ear, and in real time, it's translating what I'm saying in Welsh. And it can do this in about 25 different languages. So it's going to the internet, taking my voice, figuring it out, and then presenting it back in Welsh in real time as I speak. It's not doing too badly. I've got a slight advantage, achos dwi'n gallu siarad Cymraeg, so dwi'n deall beth mae'n dweud ar y sgrin. So, dwi'n hogyn on this morning. So, but I've often find myself presenting in Chinese or in Spanish or in French, etc., and I'll use this. So all it's doing is amplifying my ability to communicate through an intelligent service, artificial intelligence. With speech, what we can do is that we can talk to devices and ask it to do something. So if our hands are busy and we say, hey, can you take a picture of that? Or hey, Cortana, can you book an appointment for next Wednesday for me? That's an AI service. And so we have those services that run today. And then we have things like knowledge, or we can ask it a question. You know, what should the soil level, pH level for the soil be at this time of year in this location? And it goes away and tells me the answer, speaks it to me. So those are all services, we call them cognitive services, that sit inside of artificial intelligence. And Microsoft builds these services, but we want them used in all kinds of contexts. We want them used in every kind of way. The third one I want to talk about is VR, called Augmented Reality, where we introduced something called a Hololens. I've got one with me here today. And if you come to the corner stand a little bit later on, and you put this on, you'll see some ballerinas dancing around our stand. Well, that's handy, you might say. That was well worth $100 million of investment to make such a thing. But the reality is, this is a computer for people whose hands are busy. And it's a way of looking at data and showing data in a space. So for example, I'm going to show you a little video. I'm going to let it run. You won't be able to hear it because it's just so noisy in here. But I'll give you an example and I'll talk through it. So what we're able to do is that we're able to put a screen and actions in front of the person's face that only you can see. So I'll give you an example. This truck company, I'll play a little video. Hopefully it'll work.
First time I stepped into a cab, I was just...
There's a lady working in a US factory.
I was lost. My first month, it was hard to remember every step, and it was hard to remember
So a lot of components, a lot of machinery, an industrial space.
Every single day how proud she is of me, because down here this job is really, really good.
I have a 5-year-old, 10-month-old, coming home and saying that, you know, Mommy's not going back to work the next day. That's my biggest fear.
Everyone at Packard wants to be successful, but a new employee, it could take you multiple cycles to get up to speed. Every company struggles with training. Products are much more complex, so how do you keep up? We see guides and HoloLens as a great tool to change how adults learn. There's video built in.
So here you can see what he is seeing through the screen.
Holographic images.
So he's getting guidance on how to do something through the device.
We believe you'll be up to speed.
So you imagine if a John Deere breaks down,
It trains me.
you can call someone, get instruction, and see their hands guide you as to what you should be doing to fix that.
It's super cool. It showed the entire harness going through the door. If I took those glasses off, I can't see that running all the way through there. By wearing the glasses, people would feel less pressure on them.
From what I've seen from the new hardware,
It gives you some idea. So it's an augmented system. So in any aspect, so I can look down a field, I can look at the cattle, I can look at the sensor that each one is wearing and say, show me the data. And then immediately it can show me the current state of whatever the data off the sensor for that cattle is currently in. Similarly, I could look at the land and say, show me where I need to fertilize. What is the density of fertilization that needs to be done on this space? I can overimpose that data as I want to look at something. In fact, we've done these projects. So Ian, why we've done this project where we've produced an application that allows a farmer just to look at the land. And so if you want to be very precise as to how it should be taken care of, we can actually impose that information onto the headset. So in the future, you'll never see a farmer walking around a field with a laptop. It's just not a practical solution. It's always going to be literally on head. So let's look at the reality of how we put those things together and some examples of those technologies being used literally in the field. We're really working around about 4 different areas. One is connected farms, connecting the infrastructure of a farm together, and we're using LoRaWAN, Wi-Fi, etc., and making connectivity possible in that way, because you need network. No network, no future. Good thing is, we have a LoRaWAN deployment going across the nation of Wales, so there's really a network that's going to be accessible. Secondly, we're interested in intelligent advisory. So you get the data, and you need to make sense of it. Well, okay, I know this, but how does it help me improve yield? What do I need to do yet? So there's data-based analysis that works around that. Food safety, just in terms of using blockchain and using technology, saying where does this food come from? Where did this supply come from? Can I trace everything about it? And then sharing data as well, making it a viable supply chain so we can actually all collectively see information that we need to know. So we're interested in what we call precision farming, where we kind of enhance and focus on specific scenarios where we can improve. So to do that, we need IoT sensors, sensors in the soil, sensors in the air, sensors in the water, sensors on the animals, sometimes in the animals, and I'll talk about that as well. And we need to be able to connect those sources together and find different methods of working through that. So as a model, we've worked on that, and we've got various projects where we've worked together with various groups. So we have a land mapping project where we're working with people like Airbus, where we collect all the satellite data. Airbus makes satellites, and they have some that can get down to 11 centimeters of detail from up in space. And it can also then go down 2 meters into the ground. So it can then produce various mineral and water deposit reports on that data and gain insights from it. We can then actually plan and actually then give guidance on you should plant this. So from an agronomy perspective, what is the best seed that should work with what land? And then we can actually then do a simulation and projection. Based on these current environments, this current situation, this is going to be the yield this year from that field. So we have yield analysis. And finally, we'll engage with things like remote support. So you have a problem, a disease occurs, an infestation of something. What's my next action? I need to talk to an agronomist. Can you give me advice on how that should work, etc. So we have a program called Farm Beats, and I'll show us a little video about this, which is basically using lots of these technologies together in the context of a farm. And I'll run a little video from a farm in California. I always find it a bit odd, I show these farms in different parts of the world. There's obviously a farm in California looks like nothing like a farm in Gwynedd, but perhaps we'll make a video from a farm in Gwynedd one day. I'd like to do that, but let's see if we can get there. So let me just show you this.
This area is known as Stewart's Landing, and this is Dancing Crow Farm.
One of the world's problems is yield. How do you double the yield by 2050 to feed the growth of the population in the world? This is a project that we recently started. What we want to do is we want to enable data-driven farming. The first goal is to give a real-time view of the farm, the real-time pulse of the farm to the farmer, saying, hey, this is what your farm is doing right now. So how do you even connect these farms to the internet? It's so far remote, the cell carriers have very little incentive to provide connectivity in the farms.
The system that we have deployed here is measuring soil temperature and moisture, and it's coming from this sensor.
Here what you see is a white spaces device. The idea that we had was a farmer buys a white space router, plug it in the farm, and your entire farm is connected. Now you can connect multiple devices, and connectivity is cheap. So you can actually deploy many more sensors in the farm. You could have a dense deployment of sensors getting real-time view of all the parts of the farm. Not only your soil and moisture data, but this is a high bandwidth connection. You can connect cameras, get real-time views from the farm. So once you have all this data, you could then analyze the data to predict what the future would look like.
I'm actually really looking forward to how the process will change. This last year has been mainly a data gathering, information collecting year for the Microsoft research team. I'm really looking forward to seeing what research they've gathered this year, putting that together with what I think is going to happen next year, and make predictions for what I should plant when and where.
So that gives you some idea of where we're going with farming, but let's get more practical. In the UK, we have a partner called Agrimetrics, who's doing this in fields and in farms right now, helping farmers make better decisions from collecting data on their farms. Again, I'll run a little video for this one.
Agrametrics is one of 4 agri-tech centres initially set up with government funding, with a mission to use big data to improve the sustainability, the efficiency throughout the agri-food system. We concentrate on the use of artificial intelligence built on Microsoft Azure technology to help people get precise answers throughout the whole agri-food system.
By using data, we can make much better use of the resources that we have available to us and solve some of the most pressing food problems that are confronting all of us in the world, really.
The pedometer is attached to one of the legs of the cow, and it's a sensor that's keeping track of the hourly step count of the cow. We're trying to maximize milk production, so we want to make sure that we're identifying when the cows are in heat. All of this information is handed to the farmer, where they're able to increase yield and increase the health and welfare of the cow.
The value of a salad potato is 10 times more than, for example, a middle-range potato size. It's very important for the growers to be able to harvest their crop when they have an optimal distribution of the different sizes. Now, if you know in advance, not just how much you will have at the end of the season, but as well what's going to be the range of different tuber sizes, you're in a good position to be able to respond to the demands of the market. And what we did with Agrimetrics is an implementation of this algorithm in the cloud, and it's accessible to the growers and everyone in the supply chain. We can predict with time in advance what's going to be the yield at the end of the season, making sure that they get better profits because they will get more potatoes of the right size.
So that gives you some ideas. In South Korea, we have a partner that makes a LiveCap capsule for stock. So this is something that is ingested by the cow and then provides real-time data from the animal regarding its state. Now, it means because it's orally ingested, it's actually the data in it is very, very accurate. So you kind of get much more detailed status, for example, when in season, the health of the animal, etc. You can get a huge amount of data that's then generated from that capsule, collected, and their predictive model is then applied, particularly around temperature detection. It can even then get to dealing with diseases, etc., and actually spots exactly when temperature is happening or temperature changes are occurring. That's particularly important, for example, if you're dealing with producing organic produce. You don't want to introduce some forms of penicillin, etc., or some forms of treatment which may render an inorganic produce as a result. So these are not fantasy. In Japan, South Korea, these are very much live and active platforms that we see moving in front of us. So I'm almost done out of time. Let's just briefly talk about what's next and what I would like you to think about. The LoRaWAN network is being deployed in Wales. It's an active network out there. I just took a picture of North Anglesey, and we've certainly got sensors running, and the network is active. There are partners that no one is expecting a farmer to learn how to code. Nobody wants to see a farmer walking around with a laptop trying to, figure out how to code something. You need partners to do that. You need to work with people who do that. And we have them. So in places like MSpark and Anglesey and other groups around Wales, there are partners and teams, even North Wales Tech's developer groups, who are looking for projects to kind of work on IoT networks, to see what is possible. I was with a group yesterday who were talking about grassland and measuring grass and working out the correct yield and fertilization required to get an optimum yield from grassland as a result. So I'd love to hear more about those. I think David is here with me, and I think he was speaking earlier on. We'd love to know more input from you and your thinking on those subjects. So that's it from me. I'm bang on time, I think. I was told 30 minutes.